Okay, we're going live again. I just thought I'd take a minute to discuss with you an idea that occurred to me recently, and it kind of all came together in a funny way. This week I've been reading a book called The Pity of War by Niall Ferguson. It's a fantastic history of the background behind World War I, how World War I got started and stuff like that. Of course, World War I, one of the most devastating experiences in human experience and probably destroyed Western Europe. But reading Ferguson's book, you read through it and you see what's coming. And there's a natural instinctive inclination when you read Ferguson's book as the beginning of World War I starts to shape up in Europe to keep saying, don't do it, stop doing it. But you can see what's coming because there's this arc of event that carries you somewhere. I had very much the same feeling when I started to look at the last couple of events in terms of video and online and cable the last week. First of all, as you probably saw, Facebook announced that in the next 5 years they expect 100% of the news feed and a vast majority of the content to be in video. This is not a surprise, but it's certainly an interesting observation and recognition on the part of Facebook that video is about to become the primary means of communicating on the internet. The reason for this is fairly simple. One, the web carries video as well as it carries text. Look what we're doing now. We're live streaming, something that would have cost satellites and a fortune before. Two, and probably the most significant one, everybody now has a smartphone or an iPhone which allows them to do video all the time. 3 or 4 years ago, if you wanted to do video, and we were in the business, you had to get a camera, you had to get a deck, it was complicated, I had to bring it with you. Now everyone owns the machine that makes them capable of making video all the time. So there's very little question that video is about to become the lingua franca of the internet, the dominant medium by which we communicate, which is interesting enough in and of itself. And video certainly is a powerful means of communication, and for the very first time now, it's been taken out of the hands, or has the potential to be taken out of the hands, of major media corporations or production companies or stuff like that, and put into the hands of everybody like you and me. This is interesting to me because it changes the nature of what video production means. I've been producing television shows for 30 years and news and stuff like that, and the essence of creating video up until now was essentially a cameraman or a crew pointed a camera at somebody and they were doing something in front of the camera. It was sort of a third person capturing a performance. But now for the first time, video, the tool to make video, is put in everybody's hands, and I think we can enter a realm in which we're beginning to see authorship. It's a very different event when you have the camera and you make something that you want to make instead of taking the camera and kind of showing a performance that somebody else did. This was interesting in and of itself. The other thing that struck me as really interesting and ties into this in a very unique way is that Microsoft's purchase of LinkedIn for $26.2 billion, which is certainly an astonishing amount of money to pay for LinkedIn. But what they've bought here is a group. They've bought a social network. And I think they understand enough to understand that the future of the internet, and to me, the future of broadcasting and what broadcasting will mean, will not be more cable channels and stuff like that. The fact is that Facebook is very rapidly going to become essentially a cable channel, or a multiplicity of cable channels, or thousands of cable channels. And even if you scan through, your own news feed now, you see more and more it's video, 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 video. It's like flipping through the dials when I was a kid and we had the remote control and you went channel to channel to channel. So if Facebook can become essentially a network of video encompassing lots of different stuff, there's no reason that other social networks, social media platforms also can't become effectively cable channels in a non-linear sense. You may have read the article in the Sunday Times Magazine section about Netflix, and it said Netflix is the first one to sort of go non-linear, and said, will it destroy cable? It may, in fact, but you probably also read that it loses $1 billion a year, which is a lot of money, even for Netflix. The interesting thing here is, of course, that Netflix represents the broad spectrum of everything. It's got comedy, it's got movies, it's got, old TV shows, it's got new TV shows. Netflix kind of does online what USA Cable did when it first started as a cable channel, is it tried to be all things to all people. But I think as we go forward and we get more and more of these online affinity groups, these social networks beginning to adapt to video, you're going to find a kind of a narrowcasting where there'll be one I can call a cable channel. I would call it one social media group that deals with food, and another one that deals with sports, and another one that deals with news and stuff like that. And they are by definition nonlinear. But what makes the most interesting is that the content now, for the first time, instead of being done by production companies, can be done by everybody, you and me. After all, who contributes to Facebook? Facebook doesn't have professional writers that work for it. It doesn't have a team of journalists that work for it. Instagram doesn't have thousands of professional photographers that work on it. Instagram is created by us. Facebook is created by us. Airbnb is created by us. eBay is created by us. And so now this notion of let's take this ease of making video for the very first time because of the ubiquity of smartphones and the ability to make video like this, and let's say we marry that to a format that allows us, you and me, all of us, to make video and put it up on this shared platform and effectively create a whole new kind of network that never existed before. Of course, the key to this whole thing is video literacy, and most people are not particularly video literate. In fact, video is still thought of as this special thing that only TV networks or TV producers or film producers are allowed to do, and that's because we had 70 years of the medium being owned and controlled entirely by a couple of major media corporations, which was so expensive they were the only ones who could afford to do it. But as everybody gets their hands on these things, you know, it's interesting. Television networks look at iPhones and they say TV everywhere. You can watch your TV on this thing now. I see it all the time. CBS everywhere. You can watch it on your iPhone. That's not really understanding what the importance of video on smartphones is. The importance of video on smartphones is now that for the first time we, you and I, all of us, can create the content that is going to fill this vast, enormous space. So I think we are at the cutting edge of a kind of a revolution in terms of media in this country, in the world, the kind of revolution that probably we only saw once before with the invention of the printing press. The printing press suddenly put the power to publish in the hands of everyone, as opposed to the relatively few. And last time I was on, I talked about Elizabeth Eisenstein's book about, you know, the impact of Gutenberg and the printing press, and of course one of the impacts was, as she points out, over time it really precipitated the intellectual revolution, the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, all brought about because this mechanism for sharing information was suddenly in the hands of everyone, and everyone was allowed to try to write, and some people did and some people didn't. Now video, this most powerful medium of communication that we have, is now in everyone's hands, and really for the very first time. So video literacy is critically important, but also the notion of all of us, you and I and everybody, seizing the technology and taking the control of the content away from conventional old media corporations. And look what they give us. I mean, look at the crap that's on cable all the time. Look at the mediocrity of television news and television journalism. This will flourish now, but only if millions and millions of us decide to participate. And I firmly believe that the platform of this is not going to cable channels and trying to schlep your shows to them and hope they'll buy something for you, which, believe me, is not easy to do and increasingly becomes more difficult the more frightened they get, but rather embracing this notion that perhaps as cable was to broadcast, now social media organizations or social groupings online are going to be to cable. In other words, this will become the platform whereby we can all share our thoughts. So that's my thought for the day. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, email me, and if you're looking at this in a recorded thing, send us an email, and we'll be going live on thevj.com on Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so be sure to tune in there, and we're going to discuss this and also how to make a living in the business. But thanks for joining me here. See you.